Again, you can make that argument to the chancellor's office and we can have other reference groups, but traditionally it's the highest performing group. A rate below 80% of the reference group grade indicates evidence of disproportionate impact. So to give you an example, because I know that's a lot of words, right? Let's say we have one group whose access rate, hypothetically, these are all hypothetical numbers, their access rate is 79.2%. And we have group C, which is the reference group, who has an access rate of 86.5%. That is the highest performing group, group C, so they become the reference group. It's really simple. You just divide group A by group C. That gives you a number. And that number, if it's below 80%, above 80%, there's no disproportionate impact. So basically, if one rate is within 80% of the highest performing rate, we're all good.
So 91.6, if you're going to give a grade? If you're going to give a grade, what is 91 points? Is that just a scenario you're saying right now?
Yeah, that's a hypothetical scenario, just to give you some understanding of how the numbers are generated of what's in the plan. That would be great.
Yeah.
Those groups are doing great. We should probably maybe look at what Group A is doing. Maybe there's something in particular that's happening with Group A that may be a best practice that we'd like to consider applying to other groups who may not have those same high numbers. Let's say we have another group, same access number figures, where their access rate is 58.7%. Group C is 86.5%. Again, it's the highest performing group, therefore it's the reference group. We do our math again, and this time we are at 67.9%. We do see disproportionate impact. Group D does not have the same access rate as Group C, and it's below that 80% threshold. So it's that calculation that takes place that is our indication of disproportionate impact. Now, that doesn't mean that we maybe are necessarily happy with an 86.5% rate. Maybe we want that to be higher. That's an additional conversation to have. So again, the data we have in here and in the plan is the starting point for hopefully some really rich dialogue about the experience of our students when it comes to these indicators. So then this is the actual Long Beach City College data. We can see the subgroups along the left-hand column. You'll notice that some subgroups are not included in the slide, including veterans and foster youth, and that's because there was no disproportionate impact found for those groups. Mostly because we don't have enough data about them. There just weren't enough of them. They were not present in this cohort, or the sample size was too small, so we could not make any meaningful comparisons. But you can see basically if the cell is shaded in red, we saw it was disproportionate impact. So whatever the rate was for that group, it was not within 80% of the highest performing group. The RG indicates the reference group. So that is the highest performing group. Obviously for male and female, since there are only two categories, the reference group is the other one. Gray cells indicate a non-impacted group. And then the shaded gray indicates a subgroup not present in the cohort and the sample size is too small. And that's an important differentiation to make. So you can see, for example, for African American Black students across the top, if we don't make that differentiation, you could mistakenly assume, oh, well, they're doing well in basic skills in ESL and reading and writing if we saw that there was no disproportionate impact, but actually they're not represented. We don't have enough data on them. So again, it's not like that's a best practice we need to look at, but actually we just don't have enough data.
Karen, can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
Because obviously whenever you're dealing with categories of students, you have variances across the state because we're lumping in different types of, for example, Asian Pacific Islander. In Long Beach, we have a large Cambodian population that I assume would be part of the Asian Filipino Pacific Islander. Do we do any additional parsing of the data in those areas where we know we have a subgroup?
Yes, excuse me, yes. And actually, part of that trailer bill is that we do have to pull out Pacific Islander students. But again, because that bill happened later than the template was put up, the chancellor's office said, go with the template. Just complete the template as the first step, and then we expect as you move forward, you will continue to disaggregate the data and follow all of these other requirements that are in that trailer bill. We will definitely pull out Pacific Islander students. We will definitely pull out Cambodian students, as that is a large population here. And again, a starting point as we have conversations with various groups on campus. If there are other subgroups that we feel are meaningful to look at, we absolutely can. And I think that's a very important thing to remember, that this is sort of a living, breathing project. It's going to be informed, and it's very much in the early stages. It's going to be informed by additional research, by conversations with students, faculty, staff, administrators. So we really are spending the first year collecting more information, collecting more data, and really figuring out who our students are and what their needs are that are impacting their ability to succeed.
Absolutely.
Any other questions on the data?
Members of the board at this time?
Thank you. So I'd like to talk to you about the process of writing the plan. The overarching equity goal at Long Beach City College is to provide a teaching and learning environment that's welcoming, supportive, and accessible to all participants, regardless of ethnicity, culture, nationality, language, disability, gender, sexual orientation, or religion, and to ensure that all students have an equal opportunity for academic success. Long Beach City College is dedicated to educating a culturally and academically diverse student population drawn from our local communities and beyond. We're committed to helping our students achieve their educational, professional, and personal goals, centered in basic skills education, workforce development training, and transfer-level education. The college accomplishes this threefold mission through its dedicated teaching, innovative programs, broad curricula, and services that are responsive to the complex needs of all of our students. The Student Success and Equity Subcommittee will create a venue to discuss student success data disaggregated by ethnicity and other student populations in order to identify barriers related to equitable outcomes. Through the recommendations of the Student Equity Plan, Long Beach City College will provide faculty development efforts on equity-mindedness, cultural competency, and universal design for learning, and in an effort to promote equitable access, equitable support, and most importantly, equitable outcomes. I think I used that word too many times past 7 o'clock. The Student Success Committee and the Student Equity Subcommittee will examine the key components of programs that have been promoted to ensure student success in order to determine institutional programs that will adopt key principles from effective programs or initiate similar programs. The Student Success Committee and the Student Equity Subcommittee will continue to support the examination and expansion of courses and alternatives to meet the needs of these student populations. Our Student Equity Plan has been developed in conjunction with a college-wide discussion that link the equity plan to curriculum development, program improvement, budgeting, and planning. The process of completing the Student Equity Plan has been transparent and collegial. A writing work group was formed to ensure faculty and staff were the primary creators of the content of the Student Equity Plan. The work group consisted of 16 faculty members, full and part-time, and 8 classified members. The writing work group was supported by the Vice President of Student Services, the Vice President of Academic Affairs, and the President of the Academic Senate. The writing work group was led by the co-chairs of the Student Success Committee and the Associate Dean of Student Success. The Student Equity Plan has been vetted to the Student Success Committee, the Curriculum Committee, and the Academic Senate. Each of these groups have approved the plan. I would like to mention again the process of creating the Student Equity Plan was one of creativity and passion. Is there anybody left here that maybe had something to do with writing the Student Equity Plan? If so, could you stand up so we can acknowledge you, please? I see 2. Yay.
Yeah, that's,
Thank you.
I think the appropriate question is, why are you still here at this meeting? But thank you.
To hear all about our lovely plans.
And it's a good one.
Yeah,
Trust me, it is very well done.
thank you. So thank you for your time and commitment to Long Beach City College's effort to provide equitable outcomes for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, members of the board, any other questions at this time? Chair recognizes trustee Zia.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going by the report that was given to us, not the presentation. So I hope you guys have that so I can reference it. When you say there was not enough data, what is like the minimum that you look for?
Excuse me, generally speaking, for the sake of protecting identities, 20, usually, if you have a cell size of less than 20, when you're talking about disaggregated data, when you're talking about disaggregating it and then looking at certificates and cohorts, it can become quite easy to identify a student. So in general, anything below 20, we try not to report. 10, definitely, because out of 10, if 2 got a certificate and they're African American Black students, it might be quite easy to identify those students. But that's sort of a standard in research.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm referring to the executive summary on page 9. When it comes to economically disadvantaged students and all the items, the veteran students, are we saying that there is not enough data? I mean, I see it's blank.
The white or the black? Because
The
the white and
white.
black cells are different.
I'm
Oh.
talking about the white. Is the white?
White cells indicate there's no disproportionate impact, so there's no difference. The black cells indicate that either there were too few individuals in the cohort, or a lot of the chancellor's office data does not have some of the flags. So for example, for foster youth and veterans, we try to use publicly available data whenever possible, because that, again, in the spirit of transparency, we don't like to use institutional data that cannot be replicated by an outside source. So from the Chancellor's Office Data Mart or Data on Demand, which are both publicly accessible databases, that's where the most of the data come from. So unfortunately, for something like for foster youth and for veterans, we can't, the Chancellor's Office doesn't yet provide those flags. I know they are working on it, and eventually, hopefully, because of the student equity plan, because of the trailer bill, because of the need to look at these groups, they are working on getting that information in there.
What about homeless students? I understand we have quite a number of homeless students on our campuses, and it breaks my heart, but I don't know how they're represented here, or what's the data?
That's an excellent question, and what was really fascinating was when we presented this to ASB, that was the subpopulation they immediately sort of went to, and they didn't talk about any other ones, but they did talk about homeless individuals, and that was eye-opening for Eva Bag and I, who did the presentation. So again, as I said earlier, this is a starting point. We absolutely will look at other groups that we feel are salient to the Long Beach City College population. The homeless population of students is definitely one of them. It's going to be a challenge from a data point of view, identifying those students, absolutely, and again, we have to think of sample sizes because we also, you can do targeted programs for 10 students, and maybe that's a pilot, but then we want to expand it. So we want to also be mindful of sort of bang for our buck, right? The maximum students that we can affect with a plan or a program. But absolutely, that's a population that certainly the students are very mindful of. So we as staff, faculty, and administrators should also be mindful of them.
Okay, so I assume that was already included in the economically disadvantaged. So are you saying that they're not because we don't
No.
have the sample size?
No, economically disadvantaged, the few times we did use internal data were Pell Grant recipients.
I see.
And then if you look, the Chancellor's Office has its own definition of economically disadvantaged as students who received a Board of Governors waiver or Pell Grant recipient, CalWORKS, or Workforce Investment Act participant, or Department of Social Services grant. So that's how the Chancellor's Office defines it.
Okay, and then on the same page, I see blanks for, I see black boxes for veterans CTE certificates. Why is that?
Most likely the number of veterans in the cohort was too small to be able to make a meaningful comparison. So if we only have a handful of veterans in that cohort, then we can't run the analysis. Because if we have 5 veterans and all of them get certificates, that's great, but we're talking about 5 people. Is that really a representation of that population? We really need to get up to 20, 30, 50, 100. Now, we are working on getting our institutional data to mesh with the Chancellor's Office data. It's just very labor intensive because the Chancellor Office has its own identification system. We have our own, and it takes a lot of work to get that to crosswalk. Eva Bag and Institutional Effectiveness, fabulous department, are working on it. And this, again, that's why the first year of this project is a lot of research, a lot of trying to find more of those students to make sure our cell sizes and our sample sizes get large enough so we can have those meaningful conversations.
Well, I would invite you to work with our ASB as you have been, and continue to work with them.
Absolutely.
We have great representation there. On page 11, you refer to direct services to students.
Yes.
What do you mean by that, by direct services?
So as is fitting from the Chancellor's Office, there are very strict guidelines of what we can and cannot fund. For direct services, that's going to be things like we can provide daycare, we can provide books, we can provide transportation. But again, the underlying current for all of this is the disproportionate impact. So it has to go back to groups who were disproportionately impacted. Now, we may have a program that we give to everybody and it raises everybody up, which will help. And we can also have something that's very targeted. So again, it's that question of additional conversations to have with important groups on campus and students to get the information of what is preventing you from getting a degree. Is it because your car broke down and you couldn't make it to your classes? Well, then let's work with you on getting some help with your transportation. So those are the kind of direct services that we can provide. Usually it has to do with books, transportation, or childcare.
And is it at no cost, or is it at when you say we provide that, what does that entail as far as books or transportation? Do we just
We haven't set the process out yet as far as we're working on that with the student. The Student Success Committee is the committee who will be overseeing this this plan. So as far as the process of applying, we don't have that set yet. But basically, we could, in theory, say to our students, here's $100 or here's a book voucher. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but it's the way it's written. We have a lot of latitude as long as it comes back to student equity. So we are looking at the disproportionately impacted groups, and the work we do closes those gaps.
okay?
So in the end, that's what's important.
And I would welcome you to work with our great foundation, and I'm sure you are already incorporating that because they have quite a bit of scholarships set aside. The other question I had was page 22. It says that students under degrees, students with disabilities had lower rates of attaining an AA or AS compared to students without disabilities. This is on the report that we were given.
On page 22?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, on the summary, yeah. Yes, sorry about that.
No worries. So what are we going to do about that? So what's our plan to address that and take care of our disabled students?
So, this is all baseline data that was provided to the Student Success Committee, which will be then shared with the Student Equity Committee. So we don't know what we're going to do yet. That's going to be in the hands of the faculty and the researchers to go out and find out really what's going on, because the worst thing that we could do is provide services to students based on assumptions. So we don't want to base it on assumptions. We want to base it on research and real data. So this first year, we're going to be doing a lot of research to find out what is going on, because I could just assume, oh, you have a disability, therefore, maybe I'll just talk louder to you. We can't do that, right? We have to find out really what's going on. And so that's going to be the exciting work of the Student Equity Committee, is to go and talk to students and drill down into the research to find out really what's going on and really what's going to work, so we can spend our money wisely, our efforts wisely, our faculty time wisely. So we don't have the strategies yet.
Okay, great. And lastly, under, it's page 41, the budget categories.
Yeah.
Um, You have $20,000 for supplies and materials. What does that entail, and by when is that going to be allocated?
So this is a very, very, very preliminary budget. Again, as Shauna said, we are still working on refining the activities. We are still working on collecting data. This was based on conversations we had with the writing work groups. We sat down with them, and that's what the other chart is with the X's, where we talked about what funding categories do we think this would fall into. And then the steering group sort of got together and put together a very preliminary budget. This is just some very, very large buckets of money, and we are going to move things around as needed. But for supplies and materials, that would be things like photocopying. We had the training session, so we had to make binders for the training session, flyers for outreach, those kinds of things. So it really hasn't been decided yet, but I know we have an annual report that will be due to the Chancellor's office, where if it's based on anything on like the BSI report, I'm also the BSI coordinator, we will need to provide some detailed sort of bookkeeping on how we spent the money.
Right. I was surprised. It seems low for student support. So I would support anything for the benefit of the students. If you bring up that report in detail, I'm sure you're going to be working on it. By the way, what's BSI?
The basic skills
Great. Thank you.
initiative.
Other questions, members of the board at this time?
Couple quick ones.
Chair recognizes Trustee Otto.
Yeah. So the $1.3 million that we're getting this year, is that ongoing money, or is this a one-time money, or how does it work?
It's $1.3 million for the next 3 years,
Okay.
Every year.
every year.
Okay, so, and then it has to be reauthorized if we're going to continue this?
Yes,
Right.
based on our results.
Legislature would have to reauthorize.
So that's 3.9 million total?
Yeah.
Yeah, was this cut-
If I can just, the intent here is that initially those funds are categorical. The hope is that over the next few years, there'll be work in the legislature and with the governor to ensure that those become part of the base, and an expectation that this work will continue and be funded based on each college's ability to close those equity gaps, which is why, as the board knows, we created the student equity scorecard, why these plans will continue to evolve and mirror the metrics that we've begun to use, and at some point future funding will be tied to our ability to make those improvements.
And that's not a done deal at this point. That's what we're hoping the legislature will do when this program expires.
Yes, this is an evolving issue from the very first time that we passed the Student Success Act. The intent has been to continue to move this forward and to build in the capacity to actually follow these metrics. As Karen mentioned, the Chancellor's Office data still is not as robust as our own individual institutional data. So all that needs to be worked out before the state holds us accountable in the actual general fund for the outcomes that they're trying to get at through these programs.
So, and it's your understanding that the intention is eventually to sort of parcel out this money based on the success of the plans on an institutional basis?
Yes, and to a certain extent, that's what's happening now. These categorical funds, I mean, the legislature, Department of Finance, the various branches, the Legislative Analyst Office are going to be looking specifically at did our community colleges use this money to make improvements in these equity gaps? And so future funding will be looked at in that light. So what mechanisms are put in place to ensure, to hold us accountable? We're not sure yet, but we're beyond the point of return now. So this will continue. What it looks like exactly, what the mechanisms are, is still under consideration.
If I may add, in the educational gaps, but also in serving those specific populations that were identified in that legislative bill. So serving veteran students, serving foster youth, which are at the top, is really critical. So if we have internal data, or if we have regional data that we can utilize for foster youth and for veterans, I think it's important for us to look at that, because we need to provide those services. But I do want to commend you on your approach, and the fact that you are using the first year to do exploration and to drill down on that disaggregated data. And I would really encourage that our institutional research office disaggregate that data, particularly for the Asian population, because we know that Pacific Islanders, Cambodian students do not do as well as other Asian groups, and it's important that we designate services. But again, doing the additional research to determine what is the best approach and how do we correct the problem, rather than just right away developing programs that we think are going to fix the problem. I think that your approach is really a fine one, and so I commend you on doing it that way. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Kellogg, can
Other
I add,
members?
can I add something related to the
President
budget? The question on the funding. The funding will change each year just because of the allocation method that the Chancellor's Office uses. So we may not get the exact amount every single year. 40% of the allocation is based upon the FTES that the college generates, and then the other 60% is based upon the students that we serve. So depending upon our student population and how many FTES we serve in any given year, our allocation is going to fluctuate from year to year. So we can't guarantee that we're going to get 1.3 million. Obviously, that's also dependent upon the state budget if they continue to provide the $70 million statewide.
So is it up to 1.3 million? Or is it?
The 1.3 million is what we received for the current fiscal year. So that's what we have available to spend in the 14-15 fiscal year. We won't know how much we're going to receive in the 15-16 fiscal year probably until June or July of next year.
And you're saying it's a function of FTES?
A portion of it is.
Okay, I see. And so the funding that we received was based on how much? What was the data for the? Was it current 19,000 FTES? What was the rate that it was used to secure the 1.3 million?
You know, I believe they used the 1314 P2 information for the allocation. Irma, you're shaking your head yes. Is that your understanding as well, that it was a 1314 P2?
All right. Other questions? Thank you. There was a motion, a second on the floor. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on item 9.1, Student Equity Plan.
President Kellogg.
Aye.
Vice President Otto.
Aye.
Member Archuleta.
Aye.
Member Baxter.
Aye.
And Member Zia.
Aye.
Academic Affairs, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
10.1 is the Structural Department highlights. It's an informational item, but Vice President Long is not here. Is someone going to do this one?
Yes. Instructional department highlights, I'd like to turn it over to our Academic Senate President to introduce our instructional department highlight.
All right, very good.
Thank you. On behalf of Dr. Long, who has been highlighting different departments at each meeting, I'm pleased to be able to bring to you the highlights of the Learning and Academic Resources, or our LAR department. The staff and faculty are continuing their collaborative work with programs and departments across campus, in addition to marketing their services to students across campus. This past summer, the department collaborated with the library, counseling, and reading on a successful summer bridge program for incoming freshman students.